I'm Mariah Mays. I've been at AMC Technology working in marketing here for almost 8 years, and I'm super excited to introduce two guests with me today for this discussion. Praveen, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Maria. And hi, everyone. I'm Praveen Ravella, CTO of AMC Technology. I'm really excited to be on this panel and review the results that we have.
Thank you. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Hi, and I'm Susan Stavitsky. I'm a senior product manager at CarMax. I've been in product for a little over 6 years. Been working in all different size companies from small, less than 30-person startups all the way up to enterprise level companies. And one thing that is consistent, no matter where you work or what product you work on, is the value of customer experience and how vital it is to strong products. So I'm really excited to dive into this report today.
Cool. Glad you're here as well. Thank you. So now that we've all been introduced, I just want to take a minute to kind of explain the background of how this discussion came about. We at AMC Technology, we've been around for 27 years, solely focusing on contact center experience and integration. And so this past summer, we conducted two different surveys, one targeted at consumers and one targeted at customer experience leaders. And what we were really trying to do is see if there was alignment between what those CX leaders really felt they knew about consumers in general for their customer service preferences, and what consumers are really looking for at this point. And so I'm hoping that will start our conversation, and then we're going to kind of drive into some follow-up questions about what that means for the industry and what we can share as far as tips and advice for people that are starting a transformation project at any phase, because everyone is really talking about these transformation projects and digital transformation, and it's difficult to kind of weed out what's relevant and where you can actually have some action to get started. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and share this first graph. Out a few details. That's what it tells me. I guess while this is loading, our first question, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. So this first discussion point is around how brands have changed the way they interact with their consumers. Obviously, since we all know what happened in 2020. And I think what's significant about this point is that while 80%, 85% of contact center leaders agreed or strongly agreed that they've changed the way they do business with their consumers since 2020, only 50% of these consumers agree. And so I wanted to ask each of you, what trends have you all seen in the industry since 2020?
Yeah, I can jump in if you want, Praveen.
Absolutely.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So when you shared this one with me, at first I was like, wow, this is so surprising. And then when I let it kind of sink in a little bit, I go, maybe it's not. Because thinking since 2020, as someone working on the business side, we all had to hustle to change basically the whole world, right? Things were shutting down. People couldn't go out and interact with brands the way that they used to, or with support centers. They wanted other features that they needed to. So from a business perspective, almost the whole world turned upside down trying to keep up with that self-service expectation that consumers wanted to have. And some of the really big companies, they were able to roll those out quickly and kind of set the tone for what everyone else needed to be providing. But from a consumer perspective, they maybe just expected those things to already be there, because even before 2020, there were brands that were offering more self-service options, curbside pickup or ordering from your phone or whatever it might be, that if a brand didn't have that, it seemed strange. versus the way that on the brand side, we're all trying to scramble to figure out how do we build this? How do we get it available? How do we operationalize it? So from a consumer, I think there was just this expectation that that was going to be there. So maybe when they think back to like, well, the last 2 years, things haven't really changed because we always had the ability to do these things, when really we were behind the curtain going, no, we didn't. We're going to figure this out and get it out as fast as possible.
And I think that like what's so valid about that is consumers really have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, and maybe they don't care,
No. And they don't. They expect it to work. Just a small story to share. I actually built a product that was a self-service product a year ago. And when we were initially doing testing with consumers and asking them for their feedback, it was very blah, if you will. They were just like, well, yeah, of course I should be able to do this. Of course this would work this way. But to us, it was new technology that we had never had before. But because it was already in the market and people already had it, they were like, well, yeah, of course it works that way. And this is great. But they weren't it wasn't like an overwhelming accomplishment because it was just expected from consumers that we'd already have something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Suzanne. And we also heard similar things, even from major technology vendors as well, where some other technology vendors are already well prepared because the industry is already moving towards the direction of self-service and AI-powered engines to do all of that work. And to some of the players or to some of the businesses, it's like, hey, we are already there. It's great that we are able to roll out and there is a customer adoption right away. That's a great thing for them that the customers are ready for it and their technology is ready for it to handle the customer expectation. Versus for some other businesses like 10 years ahead of us, every entire situation has moved 10 years ahead of us, and we are not prepared for it. And it's a last minute scramble of trying to put everything, adopt the latest customer demand, and try to shift completely whatever they have planned until the year before. Their plans are completely different. And once the pandemic hit, it's like reshift everything, scrap everything what we planned so far, and replan and rethink as to how we need to position ourselves going forward, because we got to change our direction. I
And
mean,
now we'll
that's
be
a
ready.
significant shift. Yeah.
Now
Sorry,
we'll
go
be
ahead.
ready for the next pandemic, right? Not going. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and move to our next discussion point. And so this was a question that we asked about what the most important thing was for consumers when they're contacting the brands that they interact with, customer service. And then obviously we asked the leaders what they assumed was most important to their consumers. And while there was no surprise with the first and second being resolution and knowledge for both the consumers and leaders, what I think was a little bit surprising is that the consumers actually selected the representative's demeanor or friendliness as the third most important aspect, where the leaders selected speed. And so I think that that's kind of interesting. And I was wondering if either of you had any perspective on what does this tell us about human experience right now?
Yeah, Suzanne, probably you might have something from working at CarMax and the experience perspective. Maybe you can start there and then I'll follow.
Yeah, no, for sure. This one was really interesting to me because, yeah, of course, we want our problems to be resolved quickly and we want whoever we're working with to be knowledgeable and helpful. But when you think about what's the next big one for leaders, I immediately thought, what can I measure? Right? As a leader, I need to be able to say that whatever it is that we're doing is working. And if it's not working, how can I prove with numbers that something needs to change? So seeing speed, you can measure speed. How long did a ticket take to close? How many times did a customer have to contact us with the same problem potentially? So having that information, a leader can make good choices on, do we need to staff up? Do we need to train? Do we need to do something else with our team to create a better experience? While thinking back to actually our first point we just talked about, from a customer perspective, I probably want to solve this myself, right? I want to be able to fix this. I want to be able to chat with somebody online or go, find a helpful tip that I can just fix it on my own. I don't want to pick up the phone. Most people don't want to pick up the phone nowadays. So if I have to pick up the phone, I really hope the person I'm talking to is nice, because at that point I may have exhausted all my other options. And I might be a little frustrated now as a customer having to get on the phone and having to have a conversation that I don't want somebody to be rude to me. And that's kind of like, that was my perspective of reading that, but would love your thoughts, Praveen, on this.
Yeah, I mean, those are really good points, Susan. From a business perspective, unless they are able to measure it, it's hard to make improvements. And the other around, I guess, as a business are transforming, one of the areas that they can clearly see is that measurable things is something that they can act on some of these aspects where it's hard to measure or train, especially. And this, especially in this pandemic and everything, where churn is very high, it's really hard to train and then lose a person and then retrain everyone back again. Versus in those are the areas where businesses are very keen on how to bring AI into the picture, how to bring assist into the picture, where customers would get self-service as much as possible. To it could be as simple as a quick note as to how to address issue, common issues like an FAQ, or some assistance from their devices that they already have to be able to get through any of the issues, or to the last come to an assist where an assist can help as much as possible. And the last resort they want to go for is a live person who need to be there to help the situation. But at that point of time, it's about how quickly can we get this done, because currently already customer must have tried the things that they thought it was going to address it to an assist to a live person. At that point, it's like they want to get it done. I guess if you look at that order, at that point, probably Demon is probably a business would like to handle as part of the assist rather than trying to train agents to do it.
Yeah, and I think like one thing that kind of stands out about this, and maybe you all can provide more guidance around it, but considering, that consumers still are looking for some bit of like human or personality, how can they take that into their thought process when they're strategically laying out, this is the transformation project that I need to do? How can they use that information to take that into account, um, on top of the fact that both consumers and the leaders said that the accessibility on preferred channels was actually the fifth option, when it seems like there's so much talk around you need to meet your consumers on the channels that they want. So really, all that being said, how can we add that human touch back into it, and how important are things like channels when you're laying out your transformation project?
Yes, I mean, if I can take Susan, what we're looking at, even when we're trying to reach out to various different businesses at this point, I mean, channels do uh, take a part in what their planning is and what is that they used to support for quite some time, and obviously they are looking at how to get in touch with the customers with the new channels that are coming up every day. A new app pops up, and then that becomes the sensation that everyone, all the user, and it generates a lot of user group and a lot of inputs coming from each of those platforms. But it's hard for businesses to just jump from one to another. On that front, I guess we have other topic as well, about what's the holy grail of customer experience. I guess one of the key things that we're looking at from that perspective is being agile, and how can businesses adopt an agile strategies in place, that we are not stuck with, hey, this is what we're implementing and this is what the next 10 years is, versus saying, how can you adapt a platform that can give me the flexibility and adaptability that I need, that I can shift based on the market trends? I guess that is what I see. What businesses that focus on that strategy will help them migrate and not be stuck with, hey, what is the channel that I need to support today, and huddle something up and try to build it, and by the time they build it completely, then something else comes up.
I love that, Praveen.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. It's just thinking through how you're gonna support this from a platform level so that you do have that flexibility down the road if you did want to switch channels or add new ones or whatever it might be, so that you don't lose, information, and you can quickly help the customers when they reach out to you, regardless of what channel it is that you're supporting.
Moving forward, so this is like one of the most important, I think, points that have come out of this, because research shows, not necessarily this research, but past research, companies were not as focused on their experience. If they had the superior product or service, they could stand out. And now it's like I'm seeing more and more, especially on LinkedIn or blogs, around experience is really the only thing that you have that's going to help you stand out right now. And so both consumers and leaders agreed here, that the quality of the experience was almost just as important as the quality of the product. And so, in your opinion, what has helped create that shift, and why do you think it's so important right now?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first if you want, Praveen. Yeah, so for this one, especially thinking of the last 2 years, right? Thinking of the time span of the survey, I think the market has just become saturated with products. We have so many different brands doing very similar things that when you think of the quality of the product, of course, the quality has to be there, but that's kind of table stakes at this point. Like, can it do X, Y, and Z? Well, there maybe is a bunch of different companies out there now that can do X, Y, and Z, and they can do X, Y, and Z very, very well. But the reason I work with this company is because of how they make me feel, how they make me feel supported, how they work with me when there is a problem, that experience that I get from the initial demo that I got from the sales team all the way through to the support team that I talk to when I have a problem. That's what's going to keep me at this company and at this brand. And I think that's really where the differentiator is for these companies now, is just what is that iconic experience that you're delivering that people will remember and tell others about.
Yeah, I like that point of telling others about. It's really powerful. Praveen, did you have anything to add right now?
Yeah, I mean, from product perspective, I have a different take on it. When you look at the product quality of the product, I mean, it's more of it takes time for people to start using product and then realize it's not on day one someone is going to certify that, hey, the product is great, versus they tend to look at how much investment they have made, and how long it has is able to provide the services at that same quality as it is on day one. So from that perspective, that's going to take some time to gain that perspective, as well as for someone to provide such a feedback or review that saying that, hey, the quality is great. But in the meantime, experience is the only thing that everyone can experience from day one, as to what the experience is from a sales perspective to the presentation, all the way through anything that purchased through the first day when they started using and they don't know how to use it, and they ran into some issues and they want to know how, because it's the first time I'm using a product when I get it, and obviously I don't know everything in and out of the product. So I would need to know, I need to get that experience of how can I use this product to the maximum benefit of that's going to provide the maximum benefit. That it can only come through experience. I can make a great product, but I don't know anything about it because I'm not the one who built it. I'm just trying to use it. So someone I want to provide such an experience that is going to have help me as to how I can maximize my investment in that product. So provide, as Susanna has pointed out, all that experience is what is going to give me that day one for me to see the benefit in a short run. And eventually, as I see that the experience lasted for quite some time, then I say, quality is good at the end of the day. But by the time a new product is going to be coming out of coming onto the shelf, and then I have to move on to the next one. So if you look at that one, if I had to compare in the past, new products used to come out at a slower pace than today.
Yep, I love that
So
point for sure. That's a great point.
yeah, so that made the difference where, to me, that makes a significant difference where initially the experience mattered for a long time. But once you're settled as a product and you're a leader, then you used to sustain on that brand name for quite some time before some new innovation comes around, and then that becomes a sensation at that point. But the time gap of a new innovation has reduced significantly. Earlier, if it just used to take a decade for a new innovation to come up, now you cannot tell that next day I have a product today, next day someone might have introduced a new product that may make my current product irrelevant. So in such a when you are in such a market, then relying on quality is going to be really hard because you may not, by the time people realize that this product has great quality, a new other sensation came up, and that becomes that experience is going to take over.
Praveen, when you think about that, this question just popped in my brain. How would you think a business could kind of know if that's the situation they're in? Because I immediately think about, early churn. So company, like, I love how he pointed out, like, from day one, I have experience. And usually, the first 30, 60, 90 days, depending on the complexity of your product, is kind of onboarding, right? Just getting started with the product. So, would you say like early churn numbers or feedback surveys, or how would a company kind of know if they weren't hitting the mark on experience in those first couple of days? I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, at least what we are looking at here is reviews. That is taking a major market share as to what is changing the behavior of an individual. Because when you look at, I mean, you can look at various different things, but especially reviews are the one that touches individual because that is being given by a person who actually used the product, who invested, who's on the same shoes as a person who is ready to buy it, or who has already bought it and they're running into an issue. So from a comparison perspective, if I'm trying to compare and rely on someone's input, then obviously I'm looking at who has done the same thing and who is been through the same shoes what I'm on right now. And that's what gives, as an individual, as an end customer, me the confidence that someone has invested, someone has gone through the same experience, whether it is painful or great, and they are providing as to what their experience is, and literally they are presenting their experience. And I'm looking at, okay, I have an expectation as to what experience I would like to have, and I'm trying to find, okay, who others have similar experiences similar to what my expectations are, and what type of brands are providing such experiences. And that's what I can connect to as an end customer. And that's what makes me more comfortable in going and choosing a product, one versus the other.
Awesome.
If I answered your question.
No, you did. Sorry, I went off script there a little bit. I was just curious.
No, I like it. I like the organic conversation that's coming about. So I hate to even bring this up because there's a lot of talk about uncertainty, especially with tech and this potential recession that may happen. And so I recently read something that was talking about all these organizations that really went back to the roots of their experience when we had the recession of 2008. And so I'm wondering, is there anything that you can pass on about what either you're considering doing if we do have a bit of a financial crisis, or how can we really utilize the experience when we're thinking about how we're interacting with customers if a recession may happen again?
Suzanne, do you have anything specific?
Sure. Yeah. So when I think about like an upcoming recession, obviously first thing that pops in my brain is like price, right? Like it's going to just immediately go, what's the cheapest I can get what I need off the shelf and be good. I'm going to look at my books. I'm going to decide what I need to keep and what things I can get rid of so that I can kind of trim the fat and not have to get rid of my people ideally, So a lot of software products or other things that you're using are going to be reevaluated. So when you think about if that comes down to like I'm a line item on a spreadsheet, I better have a really great experience to kind of give my product a reason to stick around if I'm not the cheapest. And you don't want to discount your product by lowering your price. You want to still, you're in a business too. You want to still make money and keep your own people, but you want to make sure that your experience can kind of set the table for you staying with that brand. But it's tough to do. It really is. But I think experience will play a much larger role if that was to happen, because it's tough to cut something that you feel is very beneficial to your business.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Susan. I mean, one of the things that I see is, at least from a recession stand talks that are going on, I mean, I see a trend until now. Most of the companies are looking at how can I mean, hiring a new person and training them is going to be a lot of painful aspect, um, versus try to keep the existing employee base that I have and try to advance as much as I can. Kind of a mindset that most of the companies were, and that what helped reduce the unemployment and whatever the unemployment rate that we are able to get to, where every company wants to retain and make as much progress as they can, because that kind of, as we talked earlier, everyone had to jump and shift the gear and try to do something different since the pandemic has hit, and they have to change the direction and they have to reinvest everything on different areas what they have never thought they're going to do it in that short period of time. That kind of led with saying that they have to make progress and catch up to the market trends, where everything became remote, everything became virtual, and and most of the shoppers don't want to walk in as much as possible if they can just buy it through their mobile. If they can place an order on my mobile, I don't have to get out of my home and go to a store just to get something. The only reason I want to go is because if there is an experience, then I want to go and experience it. If there is no experience, I just want need to go there to get grocery, and there's I'm not seeing any experience in it, then I don't want to get out of the home. Rather, I can do something else with that time. And that kind of led most of the companies to invest in those areas. And how can you bring those such kind of experiences and retain and do all of that work? But unfortunately, for various other reasons, the inflation has increased and the supply and demand has completely shifted. And that kind of changing the direction as to why everyone feels that in 2023, we could hit a recession because of the current inflation and the amount of the prices that have been increased significantly on any goods that are being exported by for any war that may be happening or anything. But I'm hearing a lot from that perspective as well, that the price have been increased from raw goods perspective, that there's no chance that companies can sustain that without increasing the price, having that price pushed all the way to the customer. I mean, that's going to bring up to change the shift from a where the management is going to invest going forward. And coming to customer experience, obviously, that is always going to be the first priority, as Susan has pointed out. And if we have to narrow down, if the management has to narrow down as to where exactly they need to spend time, I guess obviously they're going to reduce a lot of spending on things that they don't want to happen in next 10 years. We're saying, okay, how can I get through this situation at this point? And focus on experiences where exactly is needed for next 1 or 2 years, and then see how it turns out later.
Well, thank you both for sharing your feedback on kind of what these surveys and this research showed us between consumers and CX leaders. And I'm going to shift gears by kind of stop sharing. Stop sharing. There we go. And I really want to get your opinions because it seems like everything that we've talked about so far is showing organizations just they cannot not focus on this customer experience anymore. The research is showing it. This post-pandemic world and possible financial crisis is kind of leading to it. So if you could both just take a few minutes to kind of describe what I'm referring to as the holy grail of customer experience for your customers, like what would that be and why? And then if you want to add a few points in there about like how you would tackle implementing this, I think that would be super beneficial for our viewers.
Well, Praveen, you already hinted at yours, so I'm going to let you kick it off.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, from a strategy perspective, at least I look at three different steps. I know probably this is most commonly adopted as to knowing your customer first. I mean, there's a lot of technologies out there, and what can be accomplished is always the case, but not everything is applicable to every business. So we got to understand as to what business and what is the customer base that I have and what I'm targeting. And knowing that specific one would help and identify as to what is a platform that I want to adopt. So I can go and get the best platform, but again, it's not going to give the ROI that I'm looking for. So identifying that, understanding the customer and what is there in the current day, where the current day technology is, and how do I keep a pace with that and make sure that I have the platform that I need today, but that can grow with me as I increase my customer base. That's what I generally talk to when I talk to businesses. And the next aspect that I completely focus on how to make it personalized experiences. So that's really critical as we are in this age where we are in, where everyone wants to have that personal touch, whether that is AI doing it or individual doing it. And almost all businesses want have that assist to provide that personal experience first. However, can be done. And if that is not possible for another reason, then how can it be accomplished through a live person? Uh, Following the last being, as I mentioned earlier, as to being adaptive mindset, that changes are going to happen. And when we are picking anything, then the core aspect is, does it provide me adaptability down the road? Does it provide the collaboration that I'm looking for? And is it going to be transformative? So these are the three main areas that I focus on when I talk to customers about what is the best way they can shape the customer experience end to end. Probably Susan might have more inputs around that because she probably lives and breathes every day through that.
I feel like she will. I think so.
Well, it's funny because like I love your answer because mine is like a mix of your 1 and 3. And as you said, personalization, I was like, oh yeah, that one too. But my holy grail definitely is, a truly omni-channel experience where you are meeting your customer wherever it is that they want to be that makes sense for you. And I think a lot of times businesses get caught up thinking that they do need to support every single channel under the sun, but you don't. Maybe your customer base, they do everything on a desktop computer, and that's okay. You don't need to support SMS. And that's something that they're never going to use, but you have to understand your customer and know what channels make sense for you and build it in a way that it is adaptable and it can grow so that if 5 years from now they are using more things on their device and you want to build an app, is everything feeding in the right way so that your support team, your customer success team can access all the information and know enough about your customers to help them exactly where they are. I think that is the ultimate customer experience model, is just anywhere you come in the door, I work here, I can help you because I know where you're at, I know where you were, I know where you're going, and I can get you back on your way.
I think that's a very common theme right now in the industry, is like that 360-degree customer view. So I would agree. I think both of you touched on it in your answers. So really, I guess to wrap things up, I'd love your take on kind of like what advice you have for people that are maybe, customer experience is a relatively new function to a lot of like organizations as like a major focus point or, a job title. And so I know there's people that are new to this role, are new to creating a plan for a complete digital transformation. So I'd love some advice that you would share for getting started on any project.
I would say the first thing I would do is know your customers. Is if you don't feel like you really understand who are your customers, who are you serving, why does my product exist for me to serve these customers, spend as much time there as possible. Because I think you'll learn a lot about what they expect from the market, what they expect from you, what they expect with how they want to communicate with you, and help you to build your plan versus just taking one off the shelf and going, well, everyone's doing this, so we're going to do it too. Because it might save you a lot of time and money by not doing some of the things that other people are doing, or helping you to focus your teams and your efforts and your energy where your customers are.
So do you have any like specific tools or processes that you can share with how you've done that in the past? Is it just digging into your data or surveys?
I mean, I think there's a mix of different things. I think of customer discovery, and from a product perspective, it's something we do weekly, right? Like we're constantly talking to customers and understanding their problems and their needs. You can do that through surveys. So, maybe it's a monthly or quarterly survey, depending on how large of a customer base you have, asking just core questions and making sure you're keeping on top of what they care about the most. It could be calls with them to kind of understand how are you using the product, how could it be better, what other things are you seeing in the market. You'll be surprised at how much your customers will actually tell you about your competitors and things that they like and they don't like if you just jump on the call with them and kind of open it up to questions and seeing how they're doing with things. And they're telling you guys this stuff when they call in with support issues or onboarding, just spending that extra time getting to know them and understanding their business, I think will tell you a lot about how you can support them from your side.
Yeah, that's a great point, Susan. I mean, one of the things, as Susanna was mentioning, I happened to come across is to the difficulty that some of the businesses are raising with us. I would like to get your take as well as on Susanna. The one is a kind of chicken and egg problem, where how do you either to get the feedback first and then implement, or you implement and get the feedback later? I mean, it's always been there as to where we say when we state that, hey, you got to know the customer and then you got to do it. Then so the obvious question is, okay, how do I know the customer? Do I have to go and in order to do the survey, do I need to get the survey platform first and then know everything, and then until that time I don't have to do anything, versus later once we have the entire data then go and do it kind of situation, where obviously that may not be realistic, because by the time you get the data and implement, things might change and you have to start over the process again. But most of the companies are struggling on how to align this, or how to set a process in which they can go through this process as quickly as possible and adopt in an iterative fashion. So how do you do at CarMax, or in general from your experience perspective, trying to bridge that gap between what's being implemented, what the business is investing towards, because that need to have to go through a lot of planning. It's not a one day everyone decide, hey, this is what direction we want to go, versus there's a lot of resource data that need to be gathered, and there should be analysis backed up by the data, and then the management should buy it, and then a budget need to be allotted, and then a team need to be doing that work. And this takes quite a bit, depending upon how small an organization to an enterprise. It may take from 5 days through all the way through an year.
Yep, for sure.
So what's your recommendation in those cases as to how someone can iterate through the process of identifying the change in the market or customer demand, or where exactly they would like to see changes versus how companies can adopt?
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a great question. I think a lot of times companies think that they need to do some big bang thing to make a big change, right? And it is going to take a lot of money and a lot of stakeholder sign off and a lot of planning. And that could be a quarter worth of work of just getting the data, analyzing data, making the plan, getting the budget, setting up the team, right? We just lost a quarter now of doing nothing. Well, no, sometimes iterations can be very small. And I think that's where having that continuous discovery and development cycle in your culture at a business is just listening to your customers and providing that feedback to your teams on a regular basis feeds that engine constantly, that when you start hearing things over and over and over again, you go, okay, there's a trend here happening. There may be something bigger that we need to dive into. But sometimes iterations are small, right? Like, hey, we're getting a lot of customer support questions about this one feature, or we're getting a lot of issues about how to use X. And it could be very simple things that your team can be tweaking on a regular basis, as long as that feedback loop and communication is happening within your organization. There's a lot of times that information is not making its way back to the engineering team or the product team. So they don't know that there are these little things they could be doing on a regular basis. And bridging that gap between your frontline teams who are constantly talking to your customers and your back end teams who are building your products and supporting it, a lot of times those teams aren't talking, and having a way for them to talk and share that information more regularly, I think, is incredibly powerful for your organization, because then you can be doing these little iterations constantly, quickly making improvements to the experience while doing the analysis around the big project, the big new team, the big budget that you're going to need to, maybe buy a tool or implement something new. It's tough to juggle, I won't lie. And it's a muscle that you have to kind of start building and learning and appreciating across your organization. It won't happen overnight if you're not doing it at all today, but it's so powerful once you start doing it.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. I mean, that was really insightful for someone as you're going through every day. You have to go through the process and try to see that difference happen. And there is a quite shift between how businesses used to do it in the past versus trying to be agile and iterative became a necessity. It's not an option anymore. Rather, it's necessity for businesses to adopt and be able to meet customer demand or customers' expectations.
Yep. And sometimes some of the things are the littlest. One thing that our team ran into once is we were hearing this feedback over and over that our customers couldn't use this, they couldn't use this. And when we dived into it, they just wanted a print button. And we're like, oh, we can give you a print button. So we quickly gave them a print button. And that whole situation that we thought we were going to have to re-platform and integrate with something and all of these things, they're like, oh no, we just want to be able to print it out. We're like, okay, easy enough. We can print that.
I love that. So cool. So I guess this one might be geared more for you, Praveen, but kind of on the opposite spectrum of that, kind of simple things in technology. Is there a new modern technology that is your favorite that you think is really helping with the customer experience right now?
To just follow up with the question that we are just talking about, the topic about how businesses can transform in iterative fashion. As Susan has shared her perspectives to having the information being flown all the way to the front line to the analyst who is actually going to use that data. But most of the times, the frontline person is about getting their job done. Obviously, because that is what their metrics is about as to how you're doing your sale or how you're doing a point of contact or point of sale. And your metrics is about completing that work. Your metrics is not about, there's no way to calculate, identify a metric that you can actually see a value in a month or a quarter about what data you're gathering and how much useful that is going to be only be proven in future. So that kind of takes a back seat where a frontline person do not see a value coming out of their work immediately, or even a week they won't see it, or even company cannot compensate it in a way that, hey, you're gathering this data, that you're doing a great job, because even company can't see a value out of it probably in a quarter or two. So that kind of causing a gap in how effectively businesses can gather the data uh, out of the line as to what is not relevant there, but it is critical for their future decisions. So on that aspect, we're looking at as to how to build analytics, how to gather this data and build an analytics engine out of the data flow itself, so that it's not an exercise for a business that they have to set up a team to gather data, do analysis, and then try to act on it, versus if you're doing business, there is some process going on. So that same process should automatically go through an analytics engine, an AI analytics engine, and that engine should provide you the insight as to what is happening on a regular basis. It should not be a separate task by itself that you have to do you have to gather data, you have to do analytics, versus you have to let your process feed every single thing that you're doing has to collect data, has to go through analysis. That is a parallel process that's going on behind the scenes that you will not see value on day one, but as Sushan pointed out, you'll start to see trends. Once once you have enough data and you started to see trends, then business will see value in it. And that may take a quarter or two when you set up initially, but that is the best way to go forward in the current day world in order for business to sustain and compete. So that's one of the key areas that we are seeing today as to solving how to make businesses more agile and iterative, and be able to collect these metrics in a way that when we know that it's not going to be relevant for any individual, if you take an individual person or a role, it will not be relevant. So it's going to be a back burner if you try to put it on on anyone's plate, versus it has to embed in the entire process that you are doing that in the background.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because it is just an additional task for that individual that, again, you're saying that's not part of their job, so they need to get on to the next task as fast as possible. As a product manager, I used to go and just sit with our customer success teams and just listen. And it was my job, right? Because I'm the one who's going to benefit from this information, and being able to take it back to the teams and just really sit on an extra headset and eavesdrop on all of the customer calls and take as many notes as fast as physically possible. But I'm not going to capture everything. And if I didn't do that every single day, you're going to miss really good trends in that information. So yeah, how you described it is exactly how you want to go about doing it. It's just, how do you capture all of it and then start to evaluate it?
Yeah, that goes back to my second point as to data could be very large. Data set could be very large, as Sen pointed out. You can't sit and listen to every single call, every single chat that is happening, or every single SMS. So the other thing that we are currently doing is about transcription. Having everything to be converted into a transcript. If it is chat, it's already in transcript. Any other text form is already in transcript. If it is voice, then make it a transcript. Have those transcripts go through analytics engine to identify the intents, identify the key terms that they are referring to, customers are referring to, and then that should build up the necessary trends as to what exactly, or overall volume perspective, what are the trends that are being observed, so that no individual has to sit and do it, versus an engine is doing all the time. And that's one of the key areas that we are working with the customers as to how can they adopt transcription? How can that help in trends, identifying trends that they have not been able to capture before? So that takes away the entire work out of an individual. It's not a job per se, or it's not something that you have to add to someone else's plate. Versus someone is doing their own job, and that kind of building analytics behind the scenes because you're taking advantage of everything that's already happening. So that's another major thing that currently most of the customers we are talking to, we are asking them to go towards the direction of pushing all the transcript into analytics, identify the intents, identify the patterns. And that's going to bring up as to what exactly, how they can utilize the data to take it forward. Yeah. And the last one we're really looking at is about virtual experience. Is one of the things that we are currently seeing the major area where there could be a significant change is about when anytime we have to call, of course, as Susan pointed out, it's the last thing that anyone wants to do because they're taking their time out of the day and make a phone call. So even when they make a phone call, how can we make that a visual experience before they hit an agent? Because even if it is, say currently we have SS, that's going to make in, that's going to, yeah, bot is going to tell me what I want. I mean, it's going to provide me the questions and it's going to understand my intents and then try to navigate through the process. But yeah, still I have to spell out everything. If I have to spell out my account name, account number, or my any other details for it to authorize me, then you have to spell out everything. Versus how can I connect that to my app on my phone that I'm already logged in? That I don't have to spell up everything. I make a phone call and it's going to point me saying, would you like to interact with the app that you already have on your phone? And you would be able to do everything on that app and I will guide you. So it's more of like I'm going to make a phone call and it's going to immediately connect to my app on my phone with the company, and then it's going to know what screen I'm seeing. And if I'm a customer to one of the bank and say I want to apply for a loan, and I make a phone call saying out loud, apply for a loan, then immediately it's going to open me a web page of that company, or it's going to log into the app of that I have on my phone, and it's going to say, okay, this is a loan application, and it knows as to what screen I'm looking at, and it's going to guide me. Okay, can you please fill in your details as to how much loan amount you would like to have? Please key in those few details and then submit it. And it's guiding me through the process as I'm typing in. I don't even have to talk to anyone. I don't have to keep on saying it and the AI bot not able to understand it. I have it's like, tell me your date of birth in month, date, year, and somebody is going to miss it and I have to spell it again or I have to tell it again. So versus saying I'm just keying in my date of birth right on the page and it knows that what field I'm typing in. So that's
Yeah.
kind of a visual experience, what we are looking as a next trend uh, from an AI bot improvement perspective.
And
I
I
actually
love
love
that.
that.
Yeah, the really letting, the millennial in me especially is like, just take my data and then I don't have to talk to anyone. Sure, I'm fine with that.
Take my money. Just take my money.
Yeah.
No, I love that because sometimes you actually want to do it yourself and you can't find it. And so if
Yeah.
I call and they're like, "Oh yeah, we just opened the page for you," I'm like, "Done. Thank you."
Yeah. So I think that, really that's all the questions that I have for you today, but I just wanted to follow up. It seems like a couple of themes really came out of this. And I think regardless of what kind of transformation project you're on or what new technology, there's some key things that people really need to still focus on. And I think the number one thing that we kept talking about was know your customers. Like, you can't move forward with anything until you dig into the data and do the research. That was a big one. The next one I think is really around like this adaptable technology that really supports like agile processes was kind of a reoccurring theme throughout the conversation. So important. And then lastly, really is that if you aren't already focusing on that experience, you have to start now. So anything else that you would add as we look towards trends for the end of 2022 and into going into 2023?
If I can add, Amari, I mean, you had all the great points. I guess probably what rubber meets the road kind of situation is about implementing those. And especially on the first point that you have raised as to knowing your customer. I mean, that's been there in the industry. It's not today some revolution has identified, to some resolution we have identified it, but it's been there. But what is really challenging is, as Susan pointed out, is trying to find that iterative approach of identifying customer trends and being able to um, implement it within the organization. That is where most of the businesses are struggling. Everyone knows they have to know the customer, but they don't know how to do it or how to implement that process in a way that it is going to work within their own business. So that is the difficulty that businesses are looking at to solve. I mean, getting to that understanding is one aspect of it to begin with, as to why it's not working and how to do it in today's fast economy. And implementing is a completely different portion of it. And because there's a lot of personality that's going to come into the picture once you start implementing, as to everyone need to understand. If it's an enterprise, it's really hard to move at once versus a small company, because everyone needs to buy in that as to why we are doing it. And what is that if we don't do it this way, and why we have to do it in only in this way, and why is that aligned with the current day market? So those are the areas where businesses are struggling as to how to implement that process. I'm not sure, Suzanne, if you have anything specific there.
No, I think that's a great call out, and it has to be something that's adopted across the organization. It can't be just one department wanting to push for it, or one group of customers that are like being loud and you're like, oh, we need to listen to them. It's across the board. Every leadership member needs to be bought into it and really iterating that with their teams of the value that this will bring to the organization as well.
I really appreciate both of your time. You brought a lot of value to this conversation from two different perspectives, and I hope you all enjoyed it.
Yes, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you, Maria. Thank you, Suzanne, for joining.
All right, bye.
Bye.